Welcome back to another mini episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. I'm actually coming in from a new location. I'm living in Margate now instead of living in Madeira, where I was for a couple of years. And this is the first mini episode, podcast episode. First mini episode I'm recording from here. And this is about a question that often I hear from men is like, is there any good women around, right? And I could add in, and good men. And most of this will apply for men and women in many ways. But it's a question that I hear a lot, right? I hear this question a lot from guys. Like, oh, there's no good women around. And I've been active in the dating world for probably, 23, 24 years. I probably started really dating at the age of, I'd say probably 18. And, even though I haven't been dating for the last 3.5 years, I have been coaching, so I'm still quite close to the world of dating. And I coach men and I coach a small number of women as well. So I kind of hear both sides, and I speak to a lot of women in terms of through Instagram and through friends of friends and friends and stuff like that. So are there any good women, right? This really depends as a man what you value as a good woman, right? And if you believe that you can see those values in a woman very quickly and very early as well, right? And I think this is really important because I've seen this with a lot of guys that they don't actually really know. They say there's no good women, and then you say, okay, what are the things that indicate to you that she's a good woman? And then you ask them about what it looks like. And then I question them a bit more. I coach men, and this is part of what I do, is I ask them more questions to get deeper underneath it. And I start to see that a lot of the things that they're looking for don't match up to the values that they really want in a woman. I know a lot of guys will discount women if they think that the woman's had lots of sexual partners, or they've heard that she's had lots of sexual partners. They'll discount women on height, on looks. This is one that a lot of guys will do, especially off the bat, like if they've just met someone, or they walking around the club and go, oh, there's no good looking women here, so I'm not going to talk to anybody. And we're going to come back to that point a little bit later on. Maybe they'll discount a woman on job, on whether they think she's open to being kind of a traditional female role in the household, or they think that she's too masculine or too feminine. On all sorts of things we discount people, which is fair enough, we have our things. But what I continually see is like men almost taking themselves out. The self-sabotage is very big and very real for a lot of guys that I see and I speak to and I coach a lot, actually, is self-sabotage. And that's why I do a lot of work with them, is like, seeing where they haven't seen that they're actually ruining their own dating lives through the way they are being, the things they're doing, the things they're saying, the way they're acting, the way their dating profile is. Like, if you're listening to this and you're a man and you have a dating profile, the chances your dating profile is appealing to women is so low. Like, I have female friends that show me a lot of the dating profiles that they see, and guys, like, your pictures are bad, they're poor quality, there's too many pictures when you've got glasses on, like, the bio's rubbish, like, there's no emotion, no story, no feeling. Like, it's I'm even going to do some work with a company around that. The primary problem on their dating platform is that men's dating profiles and the way that men actually talk to women when women do match with them really gets in the way of them being able to connect on any deeper on emotional level. So that's something that, men, it's like the sort of values we're looking for in a woman. And I'll say this, like, I think, right, the more superficial you are about what you're looking for in a woman in this day and age, the harder you're going to find it to meet that woman, right? If your initial kind of lines of judgment and ticking on and off are about looks and, height and hair color and all these sorts of things, you're going to find it hard to meet a good woman, right? Simple as that. What I'm seeing more than anything, though, with my clients that come to me and they're going, oh, I'm not meeting anybody, I'm not meeting any women, is when we really get into it, is like, it's not they're not meeting any women. They're not putting themselves out in the world where they could be meeting women, right, due to fear of rejection or a fear of them not being good enough, which is things we can work on, right? Or their other struggle is actually creating the sort of attraction and connection with women that they really desire to, right? and or not putting themselves out in the world. That's also something that comes up a lot. The men are not really putting themselves out there. So it isn't so much that the woman isn't there, it's just the man's action taking is missing, or his skills and ability is missing, right? So another point here is the paradox of choice. This is really important. I learned about the paradox of choice when I was about 22. I was working in a tech job a while back. Obviously, it was in a tech job, so it was a long time ago. And I watched a TED talk by a guy talking about the paradox of choice, and I can't remember his name, and he was using it in relation to genes. And he basically saying that when he was a young man, and he's probably in his 50s, so, you know, this would have been 20 years ago, so that's probably like 1960s, 1970s. He was like, there's only 3 types of genes you could buy, or even 2, I think he was talking. It was like regular and like loose, and that was it. And then you chose one and you were happy with it, right? And the paradox of choice is really about the idea that if we have, now you go into a shop and want to buy a pair of jeans, you might see like 10 different like cuts of jeans, plus you've got the colors, plus you've got the like height of the waist, whether it's a low rise or high rise, or like whether they're flares, they're not flares, they're skinny, right? And then what happens when we have the paradox of choice is that the more choice we have, the less happy we are with the choices that we make. This is a very important thing when it comes to dating, right? Because when you take this into the realm of dating, you take it into the realm of like online dating especially, the paradox of choice is huge for us, for both men and women, right? You're there swiping on apps, and then you meet someone, you go on one date, and then you're like, maybe this isn't for me, maybe this isn't the right choice, because in your mind you're knowing that you've got so much other choice, or you've got the perceived idea there's so much other choice. You've got this idea that there's all these women I could meet through online dating apps. So instead of you only having the women in your town, which might be 2,000-3,000 eligible women, right? Maybe even less, maybe like 500. You now are connected to, potentially through online dating apps, if you really take it further and further, you could be up to millions, right? So the choice you make, you're always going to feel like you're making the wrong choice, right? And this is a really important point, because we are always looking and thinking, the choice I've made isn't good, there's no good women. But actually, it's because you're always kind of in this idea that you could meet some more tomorrow. And I suffered from this in my early dating years, especially because, I started doing online dating when I was in my mid-20s, when it was really not cool to do quite yet. And you do get into this idea, there's more choice. And especially as a man, like when I was single, I was a pretty eligible bachelor. Like I had a good job, I had my own home, I could conversate and have great conversation with pretty much anyone I met in the world. Like I looked after myself, I looked after my body, I was always about growth and learning. I was curious about people. So, I was pretty eligible, right? So I was getting a number of dates, but it's easy to get in this like dating more people because of the paradox of choice, right? And the same goes for women as well. Another thing I think is affecting our perception of if there's any good women is this kind of rhetoric that we hear like there's no good women. Especially if you engage in kind of Red Pill content where they talk about women hypergamy and women always want to dating up and women always about money and status, right? You're already allowing your mind to have this idea that there's no good women around. It's feeding into your mind, it's feeding into your opinion of women, of dating. So you're going into dating, you're going into meeting women with this story in your mind of there's no good women. So you're almost looking out, scanning the environment for evidence of this woman not being good or dating not being good. And this is something I see a lot in the work that I do with men, is they come to me and I see how their assumptions about women are actually affecting their experience of the actual women that they're meeting. I'll say that again. Their assumptions about women as a whole affect their experience of those individual women they meet. So they might meet a really great woman, but they're assuming that, no women want to settle down. Women are always looking for men with money. So they listen to everything that woman says through that lens. It's through their own pain they're hearing it, right? And that affects how we react and respond to women. We're not responding to them as they are. And again, everything I'm saying could really be used for men and women. Another issue that I'm seeing, and this is going to be longer than I expected, is like online dating and this quick judgment, right? We're swiping through online dating and we're judging women on looks very quickly. She doesn't look hot. It doesn't look hot. Or this also includes if you're going out to bars and clubs or the street or whatever events, and so you're judging women on their looks before you've even spoken to them. Like, nope, she's not hot. I wouldn't want to talk to her. I wouldn't want to approach her. I wouldn't want to date her. I wouldn't want her to be my wife or girlfriend because of what she looks like. It's incredibly superficial to start with, because ultimately most relationships, yes, there's initial attraction that can be important. It doesn't have to be important, and it doesn't have to be there straight away. Attraction can grow over time as you get to know somebody, right? And this is something we forget. We're looking for this peak experience, which I talk about in a podcast I did with Amy Jolie, where we talked about the struggles of men in relationship, actually. It's a few episodes back, but it's looking for this attraction, right, to be there, even by looks. Because really, what will keep you in a relationship and what will let you know if a woman is a good woman or not is actually who she is. And it takes time to get to know that. And you have to be brave enough to make some moves, create the conversation and so forth to create that vibe. Another point here on this around, are there any good women? What I'm seeing more and more is that, and I see this more in younger men, not necessarily, I see it in younger men, but also in men that I work with, right, is that they have a deep fear of rejection. And they can have a lot of story about what it means to approach women and go over and talk to them and start a conversation with them. And this fear of rejection doesn't come to them and be experienced as a clear fear. It almost comes and appears to them in their minds as a kind of apathy, like, oh no, there's no point going to talk to women because, you know, women don't want men like me. That's one. Or they're like, oh, she's not attractive. Because if a man doesn't find a woman attractive, he doesn't have to think about actually approaching her and then facing his rejection. And I see this as a lot when I talk to men and when I coach them, that when we drill down on why they're not out and about meeting more women, or why they're not connecting on dating apps, or why they're not taking the action and making things happen in their dating life, we get down to this fear of rejection, this fear of not being good enough. And I get it. Like, I've had all these fears, and I still do have these fears in various guises. But if we don't face that pain, then we can easily stay in this idea of, oh, there's no good women, so there's nothing I can do, right? And another point, this is getting longer than I expected, but this is still super valuable, is like, one of the things we've seen in society over the last kind of 50 or 60 years is this shift in that we have a lot more access to what other people's lives look like. Right, so we've got Instagram, we've got social media, so we can see that, like, what the rich and famous look like. And sometimes we get this idea that we could, you know, be with the rich and famous. We want to, you know, date people who are better looking than maybe we thought we could get in the past, or maybe they have more money or have more life prospects and so forth. And I think this is something that's happening to both men and women quite a lot, is like, their standards have risen, right? Some of it is unreasonable, in my opinion, and some of it is very reasonable, right? For instance, like, women now, in comparison to, say, your maybe some of your mothers or your fathers or even your grandparents, right? Instead of a woman just meeting a man and being like, oh, he's in the village, he knows my parents, like, okay, he's okay, my parents think he's good, let me marry him. Women are holding off on that because they've realized that marriage is a big decision. Once you have a child with somebody, like, if that person doesn't work out, you're stuck with them for the rest of your life. So women have advanced in their careers massively. Like, you know, women's education levels is far higher than it was in, say, 1970, right? Like, that's when my mother was probably in her kind of 20s, right? Late teens, 20s. Like, you know, how more women now are getting degrees than men in the US, and I think in the UK as well. Women are entering the career ladder, and especially in their 20s and early 30s, you know, before they have children, they are on par with men, or often ahead of men, especially on a medium level, right? They're going to the gym, they're looking after themselves, they're becoming independent, they're living their lives. And as such, they are looking at their mothers a lot, especially if their fathers are still around, and they're like, wow, I want a man who's better than that. You know, I wouldn't go and settle for that. So they're looking for men who can meet them where they're at, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, even. And what I'm seeing a lot is men who can't do that. Men who can't bring a level of emotional awareness, emotional connection, playfulness, fun, interest, charisma, like, to meet a woman where she's actually at, right? And obviously there's some women who believe they're not at there. I think they're above where they're at. And I don't think that's as high as maybe certain communities believe that to be so. And there's also men out there, and I see this a lot also, is like men who, you know, they really think they're a catch. It's going to sound harsh, guys. They think they're a real catch, you know, and they're not. You know, the guys are not. They don't have the sort of emotional literacy. They don't have the conversational ability. They're not particularly brave with their lives. They're not out there really living life, right? They may have not really focused on career as much as they should have, right? As a man, they have not created purpose. They haven't really created friendship and joy and passion in their lives, right? And they're walking around going, okay, well, I should get this kind of semi-supermodel type woman, right? And again, that thinking even in there when you get deep into it, and I've seen this with a number of men, is like a fear of rejection, a fear of not being good enough, because if they never actually put themselves in front of the sort of woman they'd really like, they never have to face the rejection or the fact that the woman might not choose them, right? And this is why I talk so much about men lifting themselves up, right? Individually. Like, obviously there's some systemic problems when it comes to education, especially young boys struggling in school and so forth, and there's not the jobs around that would have probably paid men, especially at the kind of lower middle classes, as it would have years ago, right? But ultimately we live in a world where there's so much opportunity, right? There's so much opportunity in terms of business, in terms of online business and so forth, and it's very easy for us to also get really distracted by things like porn and you know, gambling. I always think of, because I've never really gambled. I see a lot of people really getting deep into gambling, you know, porn, gambling, distractions, TV and all these things, instead of facing the difficult things in life, which may be actually trying to meet a woman, because it is difficult. You have to face rejection and so forth, right? So it's also so important to remember for a woman, especially because she's childbearing, to make the choice of being with a man is a massive choice, right? Because, you know, I can talk to you about the statistics, well, not the exact statistics about, you know, single parents, but like, I think it's over 80% of single parents are women. So a woman knows if she has a child with a man, if it doesn't work out, she's going to be the one looking after him, right? So it's a huge decision for her. Whereas a man, you know, I've met many men who I've known them for 3 to 6 to 9 months, only for them to then tell me they have a child, right? Because, you know, they haven't need to. So the burden of childbearing falls onto women far greater than it does of men, right? So it's a very big decision, and it is also a big decision for men as well. But, you know, like I said, the way that it falls. So I think that there is a lot of good women out there. I meet more amazing women now in the last kind of 3 to 5 years than I definitely did when I was in my kind of late 20s, mid 20s. Women who are growth orientated, who are working on themselves, going to therapy, trying to be better women, more open to listen, trying to understand men's issues, who are physically looking after themselves, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, traveling, all those things. I meet a lot of those women, but what they're looking for is a man that can meet them on that level, right? And what I see more and more, and there are men who can meet them on their level, and some of their work is to not be so judgmental off the bat, is to, for some of them, is also to be more realistic about what they're really actually bringing as well. But for a lot of men, the work is to actually really look themselves in the mirror and go, okay, I think I'm a real catch, but really am I? Like how much work do I really need to start doing? And obviously it's to look at yourself really honestly and become a better man, because that's individually all you can do at this point if you're kind of in your 20s or 30s. Instead of wallowing in this idea there's no good women around, is actually learning really, most of all, the most important thing I think, you know, for a man is really this piece around being able to connect with people, being able to conversate and connect. The number of times that I run groups of men, or I find myself in groups of men, and the level of immaturity of the conversation, or the lack of ability to conversate as adults with other adults, it staggers me sometimes, you know, it shocks me. You know, and I'm in groups of women sometimes, the level of judgment and assumption and gossip that occurs in those groups shocks me at sometimes as well. But it's like, we have to really look at ourselves, instead of saying we're a great catch and there's no good women around, or I'm a great catch and there's no great men around. It's like, what really is going on for me? How are the assumptions, the mental assumptions I make, the stories I tell myself about men or women, and actually start to really face those, instead of looking at our friends and like getting our friends to back up our idea that we're great and that there's no one good out there. It's like actually find an honest place, an honest reflection, right, for you to better yourselves. Because to be right and say there's no good women out there isn't actually great for you. It's actually terrible for you. And it's also not true, because there's like I said, there's loads. And this is my experience. So yeah, that's my podcast today. A bit longer than I was expecting, but hopefully it's valuable to you. If you're a man and you really are looking to do that work and face yourself in the mirror and actually do the work to change, be motivated to find a really beautiful relationship. Like, I can't speak, I've done it myself. My clients do it. They find themselves in amazing relationships and they look back and go, God, that was so worth it. It was so much better than sitting around feeling lonely, feeling grumpy, feeling angry at the world, angry at women. But actually to do the hard yards, which aren't always that hard actually, and start to push yourself, to motivate yourself, to get out into the world, to find purpose, to create depth, the sort of depth that allows you to connect with people anywhere you go. But it takes work. But like I said, it's worth it in the end. And if you're willing to do that, you want to do that sort of work, to create that sort of relationship, then drop me a message. All my details are going to be in the show notes. And yeah, until next week. Ciao, ciao.